Left, the chairman of the Finance Committee, Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. On my right, Chris Van Hollen, the senator from Maryland, who has worked on so many of these issues as Ron and I and so many others. This legislation has, right now, as we begin the process of introducing the bill, has 20 co-sponsors, and I'm grateful that 2 of them are with us today. We're also grateful to have Roxanne Brown from the United Steelworkers of America. She's the Vice President at Large, and we're grateful for her many years of laboring in the vineyards on behalf of not just steelworkers, but also working men and women across the country, and the work that the steelworkers have provided to us, their assistance and their leadership in developing this legislation. And finally, Michael Grant from the Communication Workers of America, CWA, who's representing not only the union, and we want to thank them as well for their work in developing this legislation, but also Michael's personal experience with what we're talking about. The reason we're introducing this bill, the no tax breaks for union busting legislation, is very simple, and it says it right here on this sign in front of me. We want to highlight a phenomenon that a lot of people don't realize is even happening, that taxpayers are subsidizing, because of our tax code, subsidizing the anti-union activities by corporate America. So this legislation is designed to stop that. Simple as that, to end taxpayer subsidization of anti-union activity by corporations. You got to amend the tax code to do that. And I was thinking, as we were developing this legislation and reflecting on why we need it, we shouldn't have to have legislation like this. When you consider what the United States Congress did in 1935 by passing the National Labor Relations Act, which is obviously landmark legislation, still on the books. But that legislation has been undermined in so many ways, and this tax policy is one of them. Just consider what they concluded in their findings in 1935. And remember, 1935 wasn't an era of tranquility in labor management relationships. We're having a tough time right now with corporate America, but it was pretty bad then. Some would argue even worse. But here's what they found. The United States Congress said the following: "It is declared to be the policy of the United States to eliminate the causes of certain substantial obstructions to the free flow of commerce, and to mitigate and eliminate these obstructions when they have occurred by encouraging the practice and procedure of collective bargaining, and by protecting the exercise by workers of full freedom of association, self-organization, and designation of representatives of their own choosing for the purposes of negotiating the terms and conditions of their employment and other mutual aid or protection." That is the law of in the United States of America, all these decades, all these generations. But in so many ways, it's being undermined by corporate America and corporate activity. Now, like a lot of you, I have personal history with some of this, not my own, but my ancestors. My grandfather, like so many of our ancestors, worked in the anthracite coal mines of northeastern Pennsylvania. He was 11 when he started the mines. He worked there from 1905 to 1910. And in those years, he, as a child, had no protection at all. But even the men working in the mines at the time had very little protection, despite the fact that they had a union. All these years later, you fast forward to where we are today, and so many workers who are being grinded down by corporate power. And I had my own limited personal experience with this was as a public official. One day when I was the Auditor General of Pennsylvania, about a quarter of a century ago, I got a call from the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, another union that's helped us with this legislation and knows of what I speak. But they called me and said, we're trying to organize hospital workers in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, not far from where I live. Can you come and speak on our behalf? Because there's a law firm from California that's trying to bust our union. Will you give us some support? So I went to an event and spoke. But at the time, I didn't realize that they were going to be rewarded. That same union-busting law firm was going to be rewarded in the tax code despite all those protections of the National Labor Relations Act. So in essence, taxpayers unwittingly are subsidizing anti-union activity. So today, when you consider the raw corporate power, corporate profits have never been higher, and they've been high for a generation. And we've had for 40 years a rigged tax code that has helped big corporations and very wealthy Americans. But when you compound that insult by rewarding through the tax code these activities, it's especially egregious, outrageous, and unacceptable. Hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent every year busting unions. And they spend all those hundreds of millions, and then they get a tax break from our tax code. These efforts are undertaken by corporations in an attempt to dissuade people from joining unions or to coerce them into not joining unions. And then they claim these expenses as business tax write-offs, as if it's just another business activity. They should get a tax break for anti-union activity. Simple as that. And I would assert that they shouldn't get a tax break whether it's lawful activity that all of us would recognize as lawful. That should not be rewarded. But especially in the instance of unlawful activity. For example, when a corporation engages in unfair labor practices. The Economic Policy Institute found the following: 4 out of 10 in 4 out of 10 labor organization elections, just in 2016 and 2017, employers were charged with committing unfair labor practices. No company engaged in that kind of activity should get a tax break. So we're going to get this legislation passed into law. It is simple. It'll be supported by an overwhelming number of Americans when they have more information about what their tax code, what their tax dollars are being used for, to crush unions all across the country. And we're seeing it on the rise every day. And I'm honored and grateful that we have such great support here in the Senate, and especially by the first person who will come to the microphone after me, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Ron Wyden.
Thank you, Senator Casey. And Senator Casey has said it so well that I don't think I should inflict on you a long set of remarks. And by the way, you know, when I went to school, I played basketball in college, and after the game, my mother would always say, "Dear, make sure you're running with the right crowd." I'm looking here at my colleagues, Senator Casey, Senator Van Hollen, who knows these issues inside out even before he came to the Senate because he dealt with them in the House, and we're glad to have representatives of workers. Let me keep this really simple because Senator Casey said it so well. The two of us are on the Senate Finance Committee. Congressman Van Hollen knows these issues inside out. This comes down to a simple proposition: no tax breaks for trampling on workers' rights. That's it in a sentence. And all of the union-busting activities that Senator Casey just described, you get a tax break for trampling on workers' rights. That should not happen. And there are two other kind of pieces to the puzzle that I want to mention. First, everybody always asks about the legal foundation for a bill. And the fact is, anti-union speech is political speech. And any political speech is not tax deductible. So if anybody says, oh, Senator Casey, Senator Van Hollen, Senator Wyden, well, this is not constitutional, this is not this, it's not that. We are very much in line with precedent and history. Last point I want to make, and I won't go long on it, is contrast what Senator Casey, Senator Van Hollen, and I and our friends are doing compared to what the head of the Republicans on the campaign side is doing, Rick Scott. Rick Scott, instead of trying to build up the rights of workers, is trying to unravel the rights of workers with this proposal that hits hard at Social Security and Medicare. So people always say, oh, what's politics all about? I don't know much about the difference between anybody. You're seeing it right here, folks. We're standing up for workers. I want to hear from Congressman Van Hollen. I want to hear from the workers. We got lots going on. We're also trying to stand up for workers as we try to deal with the next iteration of Build Back Better. But Senator Casey and Senator Van Hollen have a very important bill. I am proud to be a part of this, a junior partner, so to speak, in spite of the fact I'm chairman of the Finance Committee, and we're going to get this passed.
All right, thanks. All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator Wyden, and Senator Casey, thank you for leading this effort, and it is great to have the chairman of the Finance Committee fully on board as a partner in this, and I'm glad to join the two of you and our friends from Labor. Roxanne, it's great to see you. Thank you, and the United Steelworkers, and Michael Grant, thank you, and all the folks at the communications workers. So I'm going to just emphasize a couple points, add a few, and then happy to take any questions. As Senator Casey and Senator Wyden have said, this is a basic principle of fairness, which is that we should not be rewarding corporations when they're spending money to interfere with workers' rights to organize. This is a well-established right, and the workers themselves who are trying to organize shouldn't have to be subsidizing the efforts against them. And the American public shouldn't have to be subsidizing this effort to interfere in the rights of workers. That's the basic principle. And in my view, this is really especially important now because you see a growing movement to organize around the country. In Maryland, we just saw the first Starbucks organize in Baltimore. And union organizing petitions have gone way up. In fact, 57% just in the first half of fiscal year 2022. So more and more people see this as an avenue toward better wages, better benefits, and more workplace safety. And so what you're seeing on the corporate side is pushback against this growing momentum to organize in order to protect workers' rights and get a fair deal for folks. And in fact, we've seen unfair labor practices. These are the illegal practices. We've seen filings against those practices increase by 14% in fiscal year 2022. So on the one hand, more and more people recognize that union organizing is a way to a good middle-class income, and more corporations are pushing back. And as Senator Casey said, we need to make sure that nobody gets to deduct expenses for illegal activity or for legal activities that are interfering with people's rights to organize. And those efforts take a number of forms. We don't need to go through all of them, but they include isolating union organizers from workers. They include advertising campaigns to dissuade workers from voting for a union, and they include so-called captive audience meetings, where employees are gathered in a room and required to listen to anti-union rhetoric. NLRB General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzi has said that she believes that should already be interpreted as unfair labor practice, and I agree with her. And if you look at the amount corporations spent just on that last piece, and these numbers are provided to the Department of Labor, it was $340 million each year, just on that piece of obstructing union and efforts to organize. So we shouldn't allow these expenses to be deducted. Nobody should be subsidizing these activities. And I just want to end with the point that Senator Wyden made regarding precedents in a similar area. We do not allow corporations to deduct their political advertising expenses. If they're getting involved in an election, they can spend their money, but they don't get a tax break for that, for trying to influence the outcome of an election. And the same should hold true with respect to workforce democracy. There's no basis, no reason that these corporations should get a tax deduction for interfering in a democratic process where workers get to decide and should get to decide and must get to decide whether or not they can exercise their right to organize. So that's what this is all about. And again, thank you all for being part of this. And I guess I will turn it over, unless you're going to introduce Roxanne. I will turn it over to Roxanne.
Thanks, Roxanne.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Casey, and thank you, Senator Van Hollen and Senator Wyden, very much for your leadership, not just on this issue, but a suite of other issues that really impact working people. And thank you for standing in solidarity with workers every single day across this country, and we just really appreciate you. And, I will keep it brief because I think you all said really what needs to be said on this issue. But I want to emphasize a word that Senator Casey and actually Senator Van Hollen used too, which is power. Because that's what this is really about. This is about power. It's about the power that workers want to have on the job to be able to create economic sustainability for themselves and their families. It's about the power that they want to have to, negotiate health care benefits so that they can take themselves and their families to the doctors without going broke or going bankrupt. It's about the power they want to have on the job to be able to negotiate for good retirement benefits, to be able to retire in dignity. And it's about the power that workers want to have to negotiate safe and healthy workplaces, so that at the end of a shift, they can go home safely to their families and their loved ones. That's the power that workers want to have on the job, and it comes with their voice and collective action. It's also about the power, and Senator Van Hollen just laid this out really well, that corporations have been gathering and hoarding for decades to suppress this power of workers. And the nefarious ways that they're able to do it. Most people don't even know that tax law allows this subsidization of this egregious anti-union activity. Most Americans don't know that they are subsidizing bad and nefarious behavior on the parts of employers to suppress the rights of workers to have a future that sustains a family. So we're here today to really talk about a tool, not to use obvious imagery here, but there's a toolbox that America's workers across industry need in order to enact that power that we all know is fundamental. This is one of those tools. We need to fix tax policy so that employers don't get rewarded for bad, it's hard to not curse as a steelworker, but bad stuff that they're doing against America's workers. And so I just want to say that we stand really proud with you, Senator Casey, who's, one of our best friends from the state of Pennsylvania, where our union is headquartered, and Senator Van Hollen and Senator Wyden, to take this thing over the finish line. We are committed to taking this over the finish line. And we're committed to gathering additional tools in that toolbox. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention a big tool we need is passing the PRO Act. Those are just two. So, I stand proud on behalf of the United Steelworkers to continue working on this and get this done. And I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Michael Grant from CWA.
Good morning. My name is Michael Grant, and I'm a quality analyst team lead at Veterans Evaluation Services. It's a company that assists veterans in completing claims for disability, and my job means a lot to me. I'm proud to assist our nation's veterans as a grandchild of an Air Force veteran who served during the Korean War. Many of my coworkers are also veterans themselves and understand firsthand how important it is that the work that we're doing. My coworkers and I are organizing a union, and I'm so glad to be here with Senator Casey, Senator Wyden, and Senator Van Hollen today to share my story, and I am so grateful for all the senators sponsoring this bill for their support. The federal contractor Maximus recently acquired VES and drastically cut pay and increased healthcare costs for VES workers, many of whom are veterans themselves. In response, we began organizing and contacted CWA for assistance. In response, once Maximus got word of our organizing efforts, they began an anti-union campaign and brought in a union buster to lead a captive audience meeting. And in these meetings, they tried to intimidate us by telling us the company would lose profits and we would be in jeopardy if we were to organize a union, and that we were joining a dying movement, and that it wouldn't change anything. We found Maximus's reaction to our organization insulting. We used to be a company with a strong ethos and a mission to help veterans. Yet, since we were bought out by Maximus, there have been major changes that have made working conditions worse and made it harder to do what we want to do so badly, and that is to make sure that every single veteran gets the benefits that they deserve in a timely manner with passionate care. In particular, we have seen increased quotas that feel impossible to hit. People are not machines. And if we're not able to take the breaks that we need and get the time that we need to get these reports in order properly, we cannot give these veterans the service and respect that they deserve. I have seen more workers call out sick because of the increased stress. And on top of all of this, our health care is unaffordable, with deductibles starting for an individual at $2,800. So you can imagine why we're organizing. And in response, Maximus started holding captive audience meetings to try and break our will to organize. They gave all sorts of misleading information in those meetings. For example, they showed a graph of the declining rate of unionization across the country without admitting to the fact the main reason for this is those same anti-union scare tactics that companies like Maximus use routinely. They also told a story about how a plant closed after workers decided to unionize. And they tried to scare us by talking about union dues without noting that unionized workers tend to make better wages and benefits in general. Honestly, I feel like these meetings were an insult to our intelligence, as if we can't make the right decision on our own about whether we want to organize or not. Yet, Maximus has focused on that rather than to actually solve the problems that spurred us to organize in the first place. And I became all the more angry when I found out that Maximus can claim tax deductions for the cost of these anti-union tactics. Union-busting tactics like captive audience meetings where we heard false claims about unionization should be illegal. And we certainly shouldn't be giving companies like Maximus that earned over $1 billion last quarter alone a tax break for the cost of intimidating workers. I am very grateful to the sponsors of this No Tax Breaks for Union Busting Act for having my coworkers and I's back. We should close this outrageous loophole and give workers like myself the chance to organize free from employer intimidation. Thank you all.
Michael, thanks very much. I want to thank Michael, Roxanne, and both Senator Wyden and Senator Van Hollen. Any questions? Yes. Well, it would be a change in the tax code, but the enforcement, we still need the NLRB to enforce it. Yes. How prevalent? Well, as Senator Van Hollen mentioned, just in one category, it's a couple $100 million, so 340, I guess it was, per year. And we've seen just in the context most recently of Amazon, I think it was more than $4 million. Maybe we can get those numbers for you, but this is rampant now. And all across the country, you're seeing it as organizing has increased and more workplaces are becoming the subject of that organizer. You're going to see more and more of this spending, and therefore more and more of the tax breaks.
And you hear the three of us and our friends say to some extent this is a choice. You know, we're having a debate right now about the next version of major domestic legislation, you know, clean energy, holding down the costs of Medicare premiums, for example, and prescription drugs, and a whole host of priorities like child care. Every one of the dollars that goes out as a result of tax breaks for trampling on workers is money that you don't have, for example, to put into those huge needs that are being talked about now. So what my colleagues, Senator Casey and Senator Van Hollen, are talking about, and Senator Van Hollen gave you a specific example, not some abstract question. This is going to reflect choices. Do we want to give tax breaks for trampling on workers, or do we want to use scarce resources in the areas that I just described, like child care?
I should emphasize, we think that $340 million a year number is just the tip of the iceberg, because that's numbers that are reported currently to the Department of Labor. There are lots of other union-busting tactics that are not reported, and so that tax subsidy is much higher.
Yeah, we have that. That is part of our initial findings of the bill, but the number is a lot higher than that for activity in other contexts. Yes. Right. Well, I would hope Republicans would support this. We'll see what they do as we introduce it. I don't think any Republican would think it would be appropriate for a company to expend dollars in the workplace endorsing a political candidate, right? That's pretty clear, I think, not just in law, but also in terms of what most Americans would believe. So I hope Republicans would look at this through the lens of what is best for the workplace, what is best for not just the workers, but do we want to continue to subsidize this kind of activity that's grinding down workers every day of the week? I also think it gets to a larger issue. This isn't simply a question of Democrats supporting unions. We're obviously strong supporters of unions. But as I made reference to, this is good for the economy. Organizing is good for the economy. And look, in my judgment, one of the reasons why we have such divisions in society most recently, in ways we've never seen in generations, is because two things happened over the last 40 years, or among several. Number one is the rigging of the tax code, where people felt that they didn't have enough money in their family budget to make ends meet, because the code was rigged for the very powerful. So they were already their earning capacities diminished by that. They can't make ends meet like maybe their parents did or their grandparents. And secondly, unionization has gone down. And so fewer and fewer workers have the kinds of wage protections for a living wage, protections for health care and pension benefits. So when people are squeezed and they feel they have nowhere to turn, that can lead to real divisions. So this is about more than just a labor issue. This is about our economy. The American economy is going to be stronger over generations if we have more union organizing. But corporate America has been doing everything, especially the last 25, 30, 40 years, to grind down unions, drive down organizing, and rig the tax code for their profits. I don't think that's good for anybody over time. Sure. Thanks, Chris.
And actually, Senator Van Hollen mentioned this in his remarks. The environment right now, in terms of workers' desire to form a union, is stronger. It's one of the strongest times that it's ever been in our nation's history. And about 70% of the American populace support unions. So, that's a desire for an economic engine that's really going to be impactful for America's workers. And Congress should help to make sure that any impediments that prevent people from being able to access a union at work are removed. And so, that's why it's important for us to be doing things like the no tax breaks for union busting, the PRO Act, and all of these other pieces of policy that will remove the impediments for workers to organize and to build worker power and to really take away some of the power that corporate America has over workers.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, thanks for being here today. Especially want to thank Michael and Roxanne for taking the time to do this. Thanks for standing up for your work.